A luxury restaurant in Paris, crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. A grand piano played softly in the corner. A group of wealthy colleagues whispered and giggled as they set up a poor young woman at a table for a fake blind date with a mysterious VIP guest. The girl walked in nervously, her old shoes squeaking on the marble floor. When she sat down, laughter erupted around the room. But at that exact moment, the man across from her, a successful CEO wearing an old wedding ring, stood up and knelt down. "Would you marry me?" he asked. The entire room fell silent. His name was Daniel. He was 40 years old, the CEO of a major tech company in Paris. On paper, he had everything: success, wealth, influence. But his personal life told a different story. He was a single father, raising his 8-year-old daughter Anna alone. His wife had died 5 years ago in a car accident, and since then, Daniel had poured all his love into his daughter and his work. He still wore his old silver wedding ring. He couldn't bring himself to take it off. It was a promise he'd made. He would never love again unless he found someone who could love Anna as much as she deserved. The woman's name was Elena. She was 29 years old, a low-level employee at the same company where Daniel was CEO. She lived in a tiny apartment on the edge of the city, barely making ends meet. Her mother had died when she was young, leaving her nothing but a pair of old shoes. Elena wore those shoes every day, even though they were falling apart. They were her connection to her mother, her reminder that she came from love, even if she had nothing else. At work, her colleagues mocked her constantly. Her cheap clothes, her worn shoes, her quiet, humble demeanor. One day, the office organized a fancy charity gala at an exclusive restaurant. It was the kind of event where executives mingled with VIP clients. Elena wasn't supposed to be there. She was too low-ranking. But her colleagues had a cruel idea. They registered her name for a blind date event at the gala as a joke. "Let's see what happens when the poor girl meets some rich guy," they laughed. "It'll be hilarious." Elena received the invitation and felt sick with dread. She wanted to refuse, but her supervisor made it clear. Attendance was mandatory. Refusal could cost her job. The night of the gala arrived. Elena put on her only dress, a simple outfit she'd worn to her mother's funeral years ago. She looked at herself in the mirror and felt ashamed. Everyone else would be in designer clothes. Everyone else would belong. She would stick out like a stain, but she had no choice. She took a deep breath and went. When she arrived at the restaurant, the grandeur overwhelmed her. Everything was gold and glass and elegance. She felt like an imposter. Her colleagues saw her and immediately started whispering and giggling. Elena was directed to a private table. A card on the table read, "VIP blind date." Her heart pounded. This was it. The joke. She sat down, her old shoes squeaking embarrassingly against the floor. Nearby, she could hear her colleagues laughing. "Look at her, this is going to be so good." Elena wanted to disappear. She wanted to run, but before she could move, a man approached the table. Tall, distinguished, in an elegant suit. It was Daniel, the CEO himself. Elena's eyes went wide. She recognized him from company photos, though she'd never spoken to him. Why was he here? Was this part of the joke? Daniel sat down across from her and looked at her intently. Not with mockery, not with pity, with something else. Curiosity, interest. "Hello," he said simply. "I'm Daniel." Elena's voice trembled. "I'm Elena. I think there's been a mistake. I shouldn't be here." Daniel smiled softly. Maybe there's no mistake at all. The colleagues who had set this up watched from across the room, waiting for the punchline, waiting for Daniel to get up and walk away, waiting for Elena's humiliation. But it didn't come. Instead, Daniel leaned forward and asked, "Tell me about yourself. Who are you really?" And for the first time in years, someone was actually listening to Elena's answer. As Elena spoke, she thought to herself, "I just want to escape this cruel joke. But why does his gaze make my heart race instead of sink?" The dinner was unlike anything Elena expected. Daniel didn't mock her. He didn't make uncomfortable small talk. He genuinely wanted to know her. "Where are you from?" he asked. Elena hesitated, then answered honestly. A small town outside Paris. My mother raised me alone. She died when I was 16. I came to the city to find work. Daniel nodded, his expression thoughtful. That must have been difficult, being alone so young. Elena looked down at her hands. It was. But my mother taught me to keep going, to never give up, no matter how hard life gets. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I understand that feeling more than you know. I lost my wife 5 years ago. Since then, I've been raising my daughter alone. Her name is Anna. She's 8 years old, and she's everything to me. Elena looked up, surprised by his openness. I'm so sorry, she said softly. That must be incredibly hard. Daniel touched the silver ring on his finger unconsciously. It is, every day. But Anna keeps me going. She's my reason for everything. They continued talking, and the hours slipped by unnoticed. Elena told him about her struggles, about working multiple jobs to survive, about being mocked at the office for being poor. Daniel listened without judgment, without pity, just with understanding. You know what I've learned? He said. The people who've struggled the most are often the strongest. They understand what really matters. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. No one had ever made her feel valuable. When the waiter came to pour wine, Daniel raised his glass, but Elena politely declined. I'll just have water, please. The waiter looked surprised. At a gala like this, everyone drank expensive wine, but Elena had never developed a taste for alcohol. She preferred simple things. Daniel smiled at her choice. You're not trying to impress anyone, are you? Elena blushed. I don't know how to be anyone but myself. Daniel's smile widened. That's the most refreshing thing I've heard in years. A few days later, something unexpected happened. Elena was at the office when a little girl came running through the hallway, clearly lost. It was Anna, Daniel's daughter. She'd come to visit her father but gotten separated from him. Elena knelt down to the girl's level. Are you okay, sweetheart? Anna looked at her with wide eyes. I can't find my papa. Elena took her hand. Let's find him together. When they located Daniel in his office, his face flooded with relief. Anna, I was so worried. Anna pointed at Elena. Papa, this is the princess with the old shoes. She helped me. Daniel looked at Elena, surprised and touched. Anna had called her a princess. His daughter, who was usually shy around strangers, was already attached to this woman. Thank you, he said sincerely. Elena blushed. It was nothing, but Daniel saw something in that moment. The way Anna held Elena's hand. The way Elena looked at his daughter with genuine care, not obligation. That evening, Daniel made a decision. He invited Elena to his home for dinner, not as an employee, as a friend, as someone he wanted to know better. Elena arrived at Daniel's beautiful home, nervous and out of place, but Anna greeted her at the door with a huge smile. You came! Come see my room! The little girl dragged Elena through the house, showing her drawings and toys and treasures. Daniel watched from the doorway, his heart swelling. Anna hadn't been this animated with anyone since her mother died. At dinner, the three of them sat together. Elena helped Anna cut her food. She asked about school, about friends, about dreams. She treated the child like she mattered, like her thoughts and feelings were important. After Anna went to bed, Daniel and Elena sat in the living room. She really likes you, Daniel said. I can tell, Elena smiled. She's wonderful. You're doing an amazing job raising her alone. Daniel looked at her seriously. It's been the hardest thing I've ever done. Sometimes I feel like I'm failing her, like she needs a mother, and I can't be that for her. Elena reached out and touched his hand gently. You're not failing. She's happy. She's loved. That's what matters most. That night, as Elena prepared to leave, Anna ran out in her pajamas. Wait! She was carrying something, a pair of old shoes, the ones Elena had worn to dinner. Elena had left them by the door, embarrassed by how worn they were. These will help you find your way back to us, Anna said seriously. Like Cinderella, these magic shoes will bring you home. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She hugged the little girl. I promise I'll come back. As Elena left, Daniel stood in the doorway. watching her walk away. Something had shifted. Something had changed. This woman, who his colleagues had set up as a joke, had become important to him, to Anna, to their broken little family. That night, Daniel opened his private journal, something he only wrote in when emotions overwhelmed him. He picked up his pen and wrote, "I don't understand it yet, but the woman they brought to me as a joke has made my heart want to live again. She sees Anna, she sees me, she sees us. And for the first time since my wife died, I feel like we might not be broken forever." Daniel closed the journal and whispered to himself, "How does someone the world dismisses become the person I can't stop thinking about?" The relationship between Daniel and Elena grew deeper over the following weeks. He invited her to more family dinners. She came to Anna's school recital. They spent Sundays in the park, the three of them, looking like a real family. But the outside world was watching, and not everyone was happy about it. The board of directors at Daniel's company started hearing rumors. Their CEO was spending time with a low-level employee, a poor girl with no connections, no status, no value to the company's image. This was unacceptable. The first confrontation came from Daniel's business partner, Philippe. He cornered Daniel in his office one afternoon. "What are you thinking?" Philippe demanded. "Dating some nobody from the lower floors. This looks terrible for the company. You're a CEO. You need someone appropriate by your side, someone who reflects your status." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Elena's not a nobody. She's kind, genuine, and my daughter loves her," Philippe scoffed. "Philippe, your daughter is 8. She doesn't understand how the world works, but you do. Or at least you should." Meanwhile, Elena was facing her own battles. Her colleagues had discovered that she'd been spending time with Daniel. Instead of being impressed, they were vicious. "She's using him," they whispered, "trying to sleep her way to the top. Gold digger. Shameless." The words cut deep. Elena had never wanted anything from Daniel except friendship. But now she wondered if everyone was right. Maybe she didn't belong in his world. Maybe she was just embarrassing him. Maybe she should disappear before she caused more damage. One evening, Elena didn't show up for dinner. Daniel called her repeatedly. No answer. Finally, he drove to her tiny apartment and knocked on the door. When she opened it, her eyes were red from crying. "I can't do this anymore," she said. "Everyone thinks I'm using you. They think I'm not good enough for you, and maybe they're right." Daniel stepped inside. "Look at me. Do you think I care what they say?" Elena's voice broke. "But I do. I care that I'm hurting your reputation. I care that I'm causing problems. You and Anna deserve someone better." Daniel grabbed her shoulders gently. "You don't understand. You're not the problem. You're the solution. Before you came into our lives, Anna and I were just surviving, going through the motions, but you brought joy back. You brought laughter. You brought hope." Elena shook her head. "But the world," Daniel cut her off. "The world doesn't get to decide who I love. Only my heart does. And my heart chose you." The situation came to a head at the annual company gala. Elena had decided not to attend, but Daniel insisted. "Please, come with me. Let them see that I'm proud to be with you." Reluctantly, Elena agreed. She wore the same old dress, the same worn shoes. When they arrived together, the room buzzed with gossip. Daniel's colleagues whispered and pointed. Some sneered. Some looked away in disgust. Elena felt every judgmental stare like a knife. Then, during dinner, one of Elena's old tormentors decided to make a scene. Standing up with a microphone for the speeches, she said loudly, "I'd like to congratulate our CEO for his charitable work. He's even taking in strays now. How noble." Laughter rippled through parts of the room. Elena's face burned with shame. She started to stand up, to leave, to run away. But Daniel stood first. He walked to the front of the room and took the microphone. "Thank you for that introduction," he said, his voice calm but strong. "Yes, I'd like to talk about charity, about value, about what really matters in this world." He looked directly at the woman who'd insulted Elena. "You mock this woman because she doesn't have money, because she doesn't wear designer clothes, because she comes from struggle. But let me tell you what she has that money can't buy. Kindness, compassion. The ability to see my daughter not as an obligation, but as a joy. The courage to be herself in a world that demands she be someone else. The room had gone completely silent. Daniel continued. 5 years ago, I lost my wife. I promised myself I would only love again if I found someone worthy of my daughter's heart. Someone who could be a true mother to her. Someone who understood that family isn't about perfection. It's about presence. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver wedding ring he'd been wearing. Slowly, he walked to Elena's table. Her eyes were wide with shock and tears. Daniel knelt down on one knee in front of her, in front of everyone. I made a promise that I would only give this ring to someone who could hold both my heart and my daughter's. Someone who could make our broken family whole again. And that person is you, Elena. He held out the silver ring. This was my wife's ring, and she would want you to have it. She would want me to live again, to love again. Will you marry me? The entire room erupted. Some people gasped, some applauded, some looked horrified, but Elena only saw Daniel. She only heard his words. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes. Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms. The room exploded with noise, but neither of them heard it. They only heard each other's heartbeats, finally in sync. Later that night, as the gala ended and people filed out, still buzzing with shock and gossip, Daniel and Elena stood together on the restaurant balcony. Are you sure about this? Elena asked quietly. Everyone thinks I'm wrong for you. Daniel cupped her face in his hands. Let me tell you what I'm sure about. I'm sure that my daughter smiles now. I'm sure that I wake up excited about life again. I'm sure that you make me want to be better. And I'm sure that real love doesn't ask permission from the world. It just is. Elena leaned into him, feeling safe for the first time in her life. Not because he was rich, not because he could provide for her, but because he saw her, the real her. And he chose her anyway. If you believe real love isn't measured by money, drop a below. Follow LT Stories for more moments that restore faith in love. After the proposal, life changed dramatically for Elena. The media picked up the story. CEO proposes to poor employee at gala. Some outlets portrayed it as a fairy tale. Others were cruel, suggesting Elena was a gold digger. The pressure was immense. Elena found herself scrutinized everywhere she went. Photographers followed her to work. Reporters asked invasive questions. Strangers on the internet debated whether she deserved Daniel. The attention was overwhelming and terrifying. But through it all, Daniel stood firm. He issued a public statement defending Elena, praising her character, and making it clear that anyone who disrespected his fiancée would have to answer to him. He hired security to protect her from harassment. He moved her out of her tiny apartment and into a safe place. Not his mansion, not yet, but somewhere comfortable where she could breathe. He gave her space to adjust, to process, to become comfortable with her new reality. Anna was the easiest part of the transition. The little girl was overjoyed. I'm going to have a mama, she told everyone at school. A real mama who loves me. She started calling Elena mama without prompting, and the first time it happened, Elena broke down crying. They were at dinner, just the three of them, when Anna looked up from her plate and said, Mama, can you pass the salt? The room went still. Elena's hands shook as she handed over the salt. Of course, sweetheart, she managed to say. Daniel reached under the table and squeezed her hand. Slowly, Elena began to heal from years of being treated as less than. Daniel encouraged her to pursue education, to develop her interests, to become whoever she wanted to be. You're not defined by your job or your past, he told her. You get to choose who you become. Elena enrolled in evening classes. She started reading again, something she'd loved as a child but had abandoned. She began to discover parts of herself that had been buried under survival and shame. One day, Daniel took her shopping. Pick out a dress for the wedding, he said. Anything you want. Elena walked through the boutique, touching elegant fabrics, looking at price tags that made her dizzy. But nothing felt right. These weren't her. They were costumes. Finally, she turned to Daniel. Can I wear something simple? Something that feels like me? Daniel smiled. You can wear whatever makes you happy. You could get married in jeans, and I wouldn't care. They ended up having a dress custom-made, elegant but understated, something that honored who Elena was rather than trying to make her someone else. The silver wedding ring became a source of both comfort and anxiety for Elena. It was beautiful and meaningful, but it also reminded her constantly that she was stepping into shoes left by someone else, someone Daniel had loved deeply. One evening she brought it up. "Does it bother you that I'm wearing your first wife's ring?" Daniel thought carefully before answering. "My wife was my first love, and she'll always have a place in my heart. But you're my second chance at happiness. You're not replacing her. You're writing a new chapter, and she would want that for me, for Anna, for all of us." To honor both the past and the future, Daniel had a jeweler create something special. He had the silver ring resized perfectly for Elena, but he also commissioned a second ring, a band that would sit beside it. "The silver ring represents my promise from the past. This new ring represents my promise for the future. Together they tell our whole story." When he gave it to her, Elena cried. It was the most thoughtful gift she'd ever received. It acknowledged her fears while also affirming her place in his life. Together, the three of them started a new tradition. They planted a rose garden behind Daniel's house. "Roses come back every season," Daniel explained as they dug in the soil. "They look dead in winter, but they always bloom again. That's like love. It can look finished, but it always finds a way to grow again." Anna helped plant each bush, her small hands dirty and happy. Elena worked beside them, feeling something she'd never felt before. Belonging, purpose, home. They started having simple family dinners every night. No fancy restaurants, no expensive meals. Just the three of them around the kitchen table, sharing food and stories and laughter. These became Elena's favorite moments. Not the galas or the luxury, but these quiet evenings where she was just Mama and Daniel was just Papa and Anna was just their beautiful daughter. This was what family meant. This was what love looked like. One night, after Anna had gone to bed, Elena and Daniel sat on the porch overlooking the rose garden. Elena voiced a fear she'd been carrying. "What if I'm not enough? What if I can't be the perfect wife and mother you deserve?" Daniel pulled her close. "Listen to me. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be you. The woman who's kind even when people are cruel. The woman who sees my daughter as a gift, not a burden. The woman who makes me laugh and think and hope. That's all I need. That's more than enough. If you believe a real home is built with hearts, not money, press like and follow LT stories. Share this with someone who needs to hear it." The wedding day arrived 6 months later. It wasn't the grand society event people expected. Daniel and Elena chose something intimate, something meaningful. They married in the rose garden they had planted together, surrounded only by people who truly loved them. Anna was the flower girl, beaming with pride in her special dress. "I'm the most important person here," she told everyone, "because I'm the one who gets to keep them both forever." Elena wore her custom dress and her old shoes, the ones her mother had left her, the ones Anna had called magic. Daniel noticed and smiled. "Those shoes brought you to us," he said. "They should be part of our wedding." So Elena walked down the makeshift aisle in a designer dress and worn-out shoes, and somehow it was perfect. It was real. It was them. When they exchanged vows, Daniel spoke from his heart. "You came into my life when I thought it was over, when I thought I'd used up my chance at happiness. But you showed me that love doesn't run out. It multiplies. You loved my daughter without hesitation. You loved me despite my baggage. You chose us when you could have walked away, and I promise to spend every day choosing you back." Elena's voice shook as she spoke her vows. "I came from nothing. I had nothing to offer but myself, and somehow you saw value in that. You saw me when everyone else looked away. You made me believe I was worthy of love, of family, of belonging. I promise to never take that for granted. I promise to love Anna as my own. I promise to be your partner in building something beautiful from our broken pieces." When the officiant said, "You may kiss your bride," Daniel pulled Elena close and kissed her gently. Anna cheered loudly, making everyone laugh. As they turned to face their small gathering of loved ones, Daniel lifted Anna into his arms so she stood between them. "We're a family now," he announced. "All three of us." The guests applauded as the sun set golden over the rose garden. Later that evening, after the celebration ended and Anna had fallen asleep, Daniel and Elena stood together looking at the painting Anna had made for them as a wedding gift. It showed three figures under a rose garden with the words, "My family," written in a child's careful handwriting. "She knew before we did," Elena said softly. "She knew we were meant to be together." Daniel wrapped his arms around his wife. Children often see things more clearly than adults. They don't care about money or status or what other people think. They just know what love feels like. Elena turned in his arms. "Are you happy? Truly happy?" "You gave up so much to be with me," Daniel laughed. "Gave up? Elena, I gained everything. I have a daughter who smiles again. I have a wife who makes me excited to wake up every morning. I have a home that feels alive. What did I give up? Other people's approval? I'll take love over approval any day." They walked through their home, turning off lights, checking on Anna one more time. The little girl was sleeping peacefully, her new family drawing clutched in her hand even in sleep. Elena straightened the blanket and kissed her forehead. "Good night, my darling girl," she whispered. In that moment, Elena realized something profound. She had been set up as a joke, a cruel prank by people who saw her as worthless. But that joke had led her to the greatest love of her life. It had led her to the family she'd always dreamed of. Sometimes the worst things people do accidentally lead to the best outcomes. As they prepared for bed, Daniel took Elena's hand and looked at the two rings she wore. The silver one from his past, the new one for their future. "You know what I've learned?" he said. "Real love doesn't care about where you came from or what you have. It only cares about who you are and who you choose to become, and I choose you. Every single day I choose you. Choose." Elena smiled, tears of joy in her eyes. "And I choose you, and Anna, and this life we're building together." She looked at her old shoes, now sitting by the door like honored guests. "These shoes brought me home to a place I didn't even know I was searching for." Outside, the roses swayed gently in the evening breeze. Inside, three people who had all known loss had found each other and created something new, something whole, something that proved love isn't about perfection or money or status. Love is about seeing someone's heart and choosing to stay. If you believe everyone deserves to be loved for who they truly are, follow LT Stories for more healing tales. Like and share if this touched your heart. Real love chooses the heart, not the wallet.